No reira, tēnei ka mihi atu. Ka mihi atu rā ki o koutou I roto I tēnei wāanga o te tau. Te wā o te hua mai o te puutukaua, ko te wā o te kiri I mete anō rā. Te mihi anō rā ki koutou, ko te tūmanako ia, ka aro atu koutou ki ngā wā whakatā, ngā rā kei ta aramai. Ngā wā kia noo piri, kia noo tata wānau, mokopuna, tamariki, me te o atu anō rā I ngā tapu-tapu, I ngā taonga, kia kite, kia puta anō rā I te koa, I te ari anō rā, I te mata kui oki. No reira, tēnei ka mihi atu rā kia koutou ko wai wā, kia ono mai ki tēnei kōrero o te pū. No reira, tomo mai ki roto I te ware kōrero o Ngāti Mutunga I tēnei pō. Ko te arunga o te kōrero o te Wānanga nei, ko te rohe ngā kōrero o tō tātou nei rohe a Ngāti Mutunga. No reira, tēnei ka mihi atu rā kia koutou. Peka atu anō rā ki te wakaaro I ngā tini aitua, ngā aitua ko koutou e kaue, ngā aitua ko mātou e kaue. Ka tangi ia, ka poroporo a ki tia, kia rātou, kua wea atu rā ki te pō. Ara rātou ki rātou, o ki rawa mai kia tātou e te ungo ora, e are taringa mai ki tēnei kōrero o te aia I tēnei kōrero o te pō. Nō reira tēnei ka mihi. So I'd just like to welcome everyone to our kōrero tonight. This is the third online Wānanga that we've done for our calendar. This year's calendar, of course, is if you've been a part of the first two Wānanga, and if you've seen the calendar, you'll know that it's been focused around taki kōrero. We've been going on a journey over these last 3 years and even leading into next year. And it's been able to provide our whānau with some kōrero to be able to put in their kete that they can then utilise when the need arises. So in 2021, we had pepeha, wakawai. So these are words that you tend to hear in taranaki that have specific meanings. So pepeha, for example, when you tend to hear that broadly, tends to be ko taranaki te maunga, ko toko maru te waka, that kind of rārangi kōrero, that structured kōrero. Pepeha here in taranaki tends to be more statements, and statements that locate you and position you within particular areas of our rohe. You also hear this word wakawai or whakawai, and that's a word that you tend to hear mostly here in taranaki, and wakawai is another kupu that we use for wakatauki or for proverbs. When I tend to hear the structure of ko taranaki te maunga, toko maru te waka, that particular format, I tend to relate that to a wakawanongatanga as opposed to a pepeha. So I'll take us through a couple of pepehatanga kōrero wakawai as well in relation to our rohe. Those who have been a part of the first two Wānanga, this would be familiar kōrero, but I think it's important to be able to go through it again to help reinforce the learning. And reiteration is good, or repetition is good, because it does help for the kōrero to sink in. Expect us to go for about an hour. If you have any questions, please drop that into the chat, and I'll be able to ask or respond to those. We've got the autopilot going as well, and that to be able to take notes as I'm having the kōrero tonight. Ka pai, ka timata rai tā tātou kōrero i te pō. Okay. I've pretty much covered that. This year's kōrero, this year's calendar, has been focused on taki kōrero. So as I mentioned, 2021 was around pepeha, wakawai. 2022 was around karakia. 2023 were focused around taki kōrero. And the new calendar that's in the mail now and that hopefully some will receive before Christmas, that one's focused around waiata. So we've selected 12 waiata to be able to teach our whānau next year. And we'll also be able to have audio files available. So we'll look at doing something similar next year, maybe holding 3 online wānanga and then going through four waiata in each session and being able to provide the audio for whānau so that you have that as a resource whenever, whenever you need to be able to draw on that information. The intention with the 12 passages for this year is that it really provides you with a broad taki kōrero that you could use on the marae and in Urenui, or you could use anywhere really to demonstrate where it is that you are from in the motu. This particular wānanga will go through the last 4 months of the year, so September, October, November, December. And I'll go into detail into each one of those just to ensure that you've got an understanding around what the kōrero is saying. So we've got works happening just out the front, so you're going to hear trucks going past and hopefully it's not too distracting. If you have any kōrero questions, as I mentioned, please put that in the chat and we can respond to those. Okay, so pepa-atanga kōrero, these are 2 key ones for us in Ngāti Mutunga. Many will be familiar with these. There's some key locators in these pepa. So the first one, mai tītoki ki te rawa te uia, karaputia nei te ia wairo. Sorry, it's not waio, it should be wairo. Te waio mi iro ki te waio kura nui, koia tērā ko te wakararunga taniwa, nō runga, nō raro. So, meaning of that, of course, no, it is waio, not wairo. From the northernmost parsite tītoki to the southernmost parsite te rawa te huia, encompassing the Waio stream. The land between Mimitangi Atua River and Urenui River is known as the strategic stronghold to resist incursions. So important in terms of the Waio Mi'iro. So many will know that as Mimi or Mimitangi Atua. But Mi'iro was a tupuna. A tupuna from one of our Kāhui clans that we tend to call them. Those who were here before the arrival of the waka. And the particular kāhui that we have in our rohe is te kāhui toka. In other rohe and other iwi, you hear te kāhui tū, te kāhui rū, te kāhui maunga, te kāhui rere. These were all groupings that were occupying this area of Aotearoa. Before the arrival of what's known as the Great Fleet, and we tend to talk about Tokomaru as the waka in relation to that Great Fleet. The other one is Te Waio Kuranui. Of course, as we can see in the English translation, Te Waio Kuranui is actually Urenui River. Te Waio Kuranui was the name before the arrival of the waka. Kuranui, of course, was a tupuna as well, same as Mi'iro. And you tend to see that tupuna name in one of the apu of Ngāti Mutunga called Ngāti Kura. Te wakararunga taniwa, of course, to be able to resist against war parties, to be able to resist against any oncoming incursions into our area. And the reason why we say that is because I'll show you an image later that shows how densely populated our rohe was along the coastline in relation to our parsites. That's why we call it Te Wakararunga Taniwa Nō Runga Nō Raro. So here is effectively our rohe. This is the settlement boundaries. So in the north, we have Tītoki, and in the south, the coastal boundaries, we have Te Rawa Te Huia. So if I just go back one, that's why we say mai Tītoki ki Te Rawa Te Huia. That's a generalization in terms of our boundary, because our boundary does come southward a little bit more from Te Rawatehuia to Waio stream, which is why we add the final point time, karaputia nei e te io o Waio, to then encompass that particular part of our boundary. So we can see our northern boundary, our southern boundary. We effectively go right out to this particular point out here. This is quite an important point for us, important boundary marker for us. It's the headwaters of the Waitara River that we call Waitara. I believe Ngāti Maru call it Te Awaroa from memory. But it's the location where our three iwi meet. And when I say three iwi, we have Ngāti Tama to the north. We have us, Ngāti Mutunga, and then to the inland, to the right of the image, we then have Ngāti Maru through here. So it's a key marker for us, Waitara. And then from Waitara, we then follow the Waitara River. That's our key boundary marker. Waitara River carries on past here. So from Waitara River, we then branch out into the Taramoko stream and then connect back to the Waitara River, which is over here. And then we come back up and then we find our way to Waio. So over here, of course, this borders Ngāti Rahiri, one of the hapu of Takiawa. Down here, of course, we also have common interest or common areas with Otarawa, which is another hapu of Tautiawa. So very important relationships with our southern boundary in terms of hapu tapawainga, so those that sit in between, and of course our iwi, Tautiawa, and our iwi Ngāti Maru. So you get a really good view of our footprint of Ngāti Mutunga. You can definitely see that a big portion of our rohe is all forest country, hilly country, all through here. The most flattest part, of course, you can see is more along the coastline here. So in the two Wānanga, we took all the way around here, went through here, showed information that then took us all the way up around here and then got us up into Waio. So tonight's session really is from Waio all the way back to Papatiki, Titoki. So this, of course, is an image of Te Rawatehuia. If, of course, you'll be familiar, but Onairo campground just down over here. So you just drop down a little hill, then you come around the corner. So if you're going towards Uranui, you'll always see it, Te Rawatehuia, just before Nairo. There's the old milk factory just here. That's a real key indicator to know where Te Rawatehuia is. But once you see Te Rawatehuia, you'll always see it. You'll know what it looks like. You'll never miss it. One of the key features, of course, is right in the middle there. You can see, hopefully you can see that clearly. There's a wrought iron fence, and there's one of the tupuna of the Martin whānau that's buried there. So that's our southernmost boundary, Te Rawatehuia. And then, of course, coming a bit further south, we then have Waio stream. Then if we go back to our northern boundary, we have Papatiki stream. So anyone that's been out to Waiti Beach, how to drive along the beach there, you'll see Papatiki stream. That's our key boundary marker. Up over here, we have also a well-known parsite, a big parsite for Ngāti Mutunga, and that's Whakarewa or Whakarewa Pā. And then if you follow the stream, so it sort of pops out here and then carries on down here and splits off this way. And where it splits off, that's the parsite called Taki. We can just see it in the distance over here on the left picture, but this right picture just gives you a bit more of a view. If ever you go to Pukearoe Marae in Ngāti Tama, you have to pass Titoki. You have to pass Titoki. So you pass over a little bridge and you start going up a hill and then around a bend. and then you'll see a big forest lot of pine trees. And that's Titoki Pa right there. So that's our northernmost boundary. Another pepeatanga kōrero that we hear is this one as well. And for us, this is a great connection to the maunga. So e kore mimiti te puna koropupu. Of course, mimiti mean dry. E kore will never. Puna, you know what puna means in terms of a spring. And koropupu was just the bubbling forth. So if you could imagine, and you may have seen this as well, when you see freshwater springs coming out of the ground, it sort of bubbles away and continues to bubble forth. That's what we refer to as the puna when we say kore mimiti te puna koropupu. But what we're referring to is the puna that are on the maunga, and that's really the fresh springs that we see bubble up from inside the maunga and then emerge from the maunga. We also refer to some of the puna or the pools that are created by the waterfalls as these particular kind of puna. So while it's literal in that it talks about these springs, what it's really referring to is about our mana whenua on our land, our tino rangatiratanga on our land. So even though we may not effectively own the land, meaning that we don't physically own it or we don't have ownership papers to prove that we own it, we know within us that we are from this land and that we have a wakapapa relationship to this land. So it also means that even though we no longer own it in terms of title, we still feel a great connection to it. So our mana whenua, our tangata whenua status will never dry up. It will continue to bubble forth like these puna do. And another one that you may hear in terms of a pepeatanga kōrero for Ngāti Mutunga is this one, and we have it in our logo as well. So it's one of our wakawai, our catchphrases that we use on our logo. So uria te tangata, uria te kaupapa, uria ngata o ngā tuku iho. This, of course, is a structure that came out of a broader karakia. And it talks about binding the people, binding the purpose and binding the gifts, the taonga that are left by our ancestors. So these are a couple of images of some of the puna that we talk about. And these are some of the waterfalls. So Te Rere o Kapuni, that's up Dawson Falls road end. Above Te Rere o Kapuni, of course, is Wilkie's Pools. And below Te Rere o Kapuni is what's called Te Rere Anoke, or Dawson Falls. But this one here, Te Rere o Kapuni, is quite a special one. On the other side of the maunga, closer to, think of where Rahotu is, and then you look straight up at the maunga from Rahotu, there's this particular waterfall called Te Rere a Tahurangi, or Bells Falls. Just up to the right of Bells Falls, I believe there's a mound, and that's called Te Umo Tau Manawa. So again, really important places for us. But wanted to show that just to give an illustration of when we're talking about e kore mimiti te puna koropupu, these are the things, these are the images that come to mind. Uria. Again, these are the images for me that come to mind when I use the word uria or uri. And you tend to see the word uri or whiri in words like kōwhiringa, such as voting, or ko or tīwhiri, which is to select or to choose. This one here, whiri or whiria, is more about bringing together. So similar to rāranga, binding. Uria te kaa is another phrase that you tend to hear from karakia, And that's all about binding using a particular thread, but it's binding the tuki to the kakau, so the face of the tuki to its handle. So again, these are important pepeatanga kōrero waka wai for Ngāti Mutunga. Whakararu ngā taniwa. So this is a real good image around whakararu ngā taniwa, because all of these points, different colours refer to different things, of course, but all of the names show how densely populated our coastline was in terms of our pathways. So our tupuna were prolific pā builders all throughout our rohe, and predominantly all the coastal area as opposed to inland. So we can see that we don't have too many pā inland. There are some down here, but all of our pā tend to be located up here. And it sort of harkens back to the hekinga kōrero, so the big migrations that occurred in the 1820s and 1830s that saw our people move down into Waikanai, across the Kapiti coast, down into Wellington, across to the top of the South Island, and of course over to Orekauti or Chatham Islands. And a number of the pā sites that were built in Wellington were of course built by our tupuna when they occupied Wellington for a period of time. Here's just an image of some of our or not some of our apu, but our apu. And we've included these apu in our taki kōrero as well, just as the way to ensure that we continue to engage with these names. So to the north, Ngāti Okinga, then Te Kerewai, Ngāti Aurutu, Ngāti Inetui, and all through here we have a number of apu. So Kai Tangata, Ngāti Tu or Ngāti Tupa Whenua, Ngāti Kura, I mentioned Ngāti Kura before from the previous, or the more older name of Urenui River, which was Te Waio Kuranui. So it's Ngāti Kura and then Ngāti Uenuku. So Uenuku was a pretty well-known tupuna up around the Onairo area, then coming through into Urenui. I'll show you where his path site is as we go through the kōrero tonight. And then that's just a bit more around our apu, where they were occupied, who the tupuna were. This of course is available on our website, so you can go onto a website and you can see this information as well. So I'll start at September. So tonight's kōrero will go through September, October, November, December. So this kōrero talks about this particular area. So as I mentioned, we're in this map here, you can see we're sort of making our way south and going upwards toward our most northern boundary point and along the coast. So that's the trail that we're traversing tonight. The taki kōrero goes, Waia te taku taimoana o te kūreitanga o te tai au auru. Ki te noni ngā kumu o ngā mātua tūpuna, ara ko te rau o te uia. Koia ko te pā maioro o te pātū watawata, te papakainga te tā ui mā tonga nei o Ngāti Mutunga. Te tongi ki tae kei Wānanga nui i a Ngāti Mutunga i a te atiawa e waka mō i o tia wānui tia ana. Waia, while we tend to see whai, so whai of course is the core word in that, while we tend to see whai or whai as follow, follow tends to mean that you're being led. When I see whaia, I see that more as pursue. So you've got a goal and you're pursuing something. You're following it because you have aspirations yourself to move from point A to point B. So waia te taku taimoana, so pursue, move forward, thrust toward the ocean, the taku taimoana, o te kūreitanga o te tai au auru. I'll show you what the kūreitanga is. I did talk about it, I think, in our second Wānanga, but it's effectively the peninsula of Taranaki. So te kūreitanga o te Taihau Wāuru. So the peninsula of the west. Ki te noninga kumu o ngā mātua tupuna, to the place of occupation of our ancestors, which is Te Rawa Te Huia. And this is Te Rawa Te Huia. Kia ko te pā maioro, so that is, what do you call it, a stepped pā. So we can see the maioro here. So we have one in here, and then takes us up to a second layer or second level. So maioro is a step that you see in old pā sites. Now, I've got a good example that I'll show you. Te pātū watawata. So pātū watawata, of course, is the fortified pā. Te papakainga, so a place of settlement. Te tā uhiuhi mā tongatonga. So tā uhiuhi, we're using that in the sense of a boundary marker. And mā tongatonga, tonga, of course, is the core word there, being south. So the southern boundary is what that's saying there. Te tā uhiuhi mā tongatonga. So the southern boundary of Ngāti Mutunga. Te tungi ki tai. So tungi is another word for boundary. So utilising different kupu to be able to broaden the vocabulary. So here we're using tā uhiuhi and tungi, both to indicate the same thing, which is a boundary marker. Te tungi ki tai, so the boundary, the coastal boundary. He wānanga nui I a Ngāti Mutunga I a Te Atiawa, that sits between Ngāti Mutunga and Te Atiawa. E waka mō I o tia wānui tia ana. So that's really saying that's the general boundary, which is what I mentioned earlier. It's not the exact or the specific boundary, because as we know, we also talk about waio. This is a good example of a kūreitanga. So the profile of a nose is the kūreitanga. The Taranaki region is a kūreitanga. This is a kūreitanga as well. So promontories, peninsulas, those are, can be explained in Te Reo Māori as kūreitanga. And of course, when we say te kūreitanga o ngā mātua tupuna, we're really referring to Taranaki. So the peninsula of our ancestors. You may also hear kūrai. So rai is the key word or the core word within that kupu. And of course, rai being forehead. And what that refers to is the coastline, but the hilly coastline, not the hilly coastline, the cliff coastline. And we can see that through here. So that's the kūrai. We don't so much see it as we come around Waitara and New Plymouth and around the coast. But as we start coming down to South Taranaki, from, what would you say, probably a bit before Manaia, and coming all the way around, it's really cliffy through here. Steep cliffs. So again, you may also hear Taranaki being referred as the kūrai tanga because of the cliff that we see around our coastline. Noninga kumu, some may already be familiar with this word. So kumu is buttocks. So some may have a different word or a different English translation for kumu, but for us in Taranaki, kumu refers to the buttocks. Noninga, so just like our kuia is doing over here, noninga is like when you sit down on the ground and you sort of shuffle around just to get comfortable. So that's the noninga. And the noninga kumu is when you stand up and you leave this imprint. And it's an indication of occupation, the noninga kumu, and permanent occupation. Just like we use ahi ka, we also use noninga kumu as words for occupation and long-term, permanent occupation. So if ever you see noninga or noninga kumu, that's what it's referring to. It's referring to an important place, a wai tapu, place of significance for our tupuna. Here's a really good example of a maioro, so we can see the stepped nature of the pā. And of course we can see it here as well. So this is one of our pā sites, Arapawa Nui. This here is Mimi, or Mimi Tangiatua, or Te Waio Mi'ira, coming out to the river mouth. It's a fantastic example of a pā site, this one, Arapawa Nui. Has a bit of kōrero attached to it as well. This image here is from Tāwiti Museum, and it's an image of Turuturu Mokai, one of their pā sites in Hāwara. But what it's showing is the different levels of the pā site, and that's what I understand is a pātū wata wata. Some refer to the wata wata as the 3 fence lines, and others refer to wata wata as the outer fence line as well. But a pātū wata wata refers to a fortified pā, pātū wata wata. So that's why in that taki kōrero we call te rawa te huia, he pā maioro, he pātū wata wata. Pā maioro because we can see the stepped nature of the pā, and pātū wata wata because it indicates that there had to have been palisades on each of those levels. So again, a fantastic example of a pā in Uranui, sorry, not in Uranui, in Ngāti Mutunga, on the river mouth there of Mimi Tangiatua. So this one is Arapawa Nui. I also mentioned the word tā uhi uhi and tungi as 2 words to explain a boundary. Tā uhi uhi in this context, so when we think of tā, it's effectively what it's showing here. So the uhi being the chisel and the tā being the tap. So it's effectively carving a line along the whenua, creating a boundary mark. So that's why we use that kupu tā uhi uhi in reference to the boundary. And then of course te rawa te huia. We talked about te rawa te huia. So I'll go back to the kōrero. The whaia te taku tai moana, to follow the coastline of the kūreitanga or te tai au Ngāuru. So now we know what kūreitanga is. It's the peninsula. It can be a profile of your nose, but effectively refers to just another way of saying taranaki. Te kūreitanga o te tai au Ngāuru, or te kūreitanga o ngā mātua tūpuna. Another way of saying taranaki or taranaki region. Ki te noninga kumu, for the permanent occupation, o ngā mātua tūpuna of our ancestors, which is this place here, te rawa te huia. The stepped pā, te pā maioro, so we can really clearly see that it's pā maioro, so there were at least 2 palisades, 2 fence lines, one there and one here. I wouldn't have been surprised if there was a 3rd and that we just can't see it now. Te papa kāinga, so it refers to a settlement. Of course, this wasn't the settlement, but around the pā was the settlement. Te tā uhi uhi mā tonga tonga. So the image of te tā uhi uhi, so the chiseled line, or the southern chiseled line of Ngāti Mutunga, which is of course the boundary mark. Te tongi ki tai, so the boundary, the coastal boundary, he Wānanga between Ngāti Mutunga and Te Atiawa, that is generally known. E waka mo i o te Wānui te ana. Right, so noninga kumu, maioro, pātū wata wata, tā uhi uhi, te rawa te uia. This brings us into the next month, the October month of the calendar. So those with the keen eye, of course, would have seen that there's circles, and these circles indicate pā sites. So here we can just see the corner of a path site right over here. Here we can clearly see this path site. It's not the entirety of the path site that we're seeing, it stretches further. So again, this one's a really fantastic example in Ngāti Mutunga of a pātu wata. Huge one. This is kai tangata. And up here, we see another path site as well, moerangi. So te ngaio, moerangi, kai tangata. These are important path sites up along our Ōnairo River. So here we see Ōnairo River, comes around, then continues to flow up the valley. So I'll go through the taki kōrero and then I'll take you through the explanation. And again, I've got some images just to provide some insight into the kōrero. Kaere ki māraki-raki ki te pūwa o te awa o Ōnairo. Ki reira te mao o ngā pāta ito, ngā pātū wata e tū ana ki taata o te awa. Ko punga e u te ai o ngā pā, ko puke tapu, ko puke miro, ko pāringa, ko te ngaio, ko moerangi, ko kai tangata. Engari, e ora tonu ana a tūpa wenua a kai tangata ki runga i te mata o te wenua. So kaere ki māraki-raki, we then travel north. So raki being north is the key word of māraki-raki. So we then traverse north to Puwa'a, Ngutuawa, or Kupu. So wa'a, of course, is the main word there, but referring to the river mouth. So to Puwa'a o te awa o Ōnairo. So we then traverse north to Ōnairo river mouth. I reira te mao o ngā pā, ito. There is many old pā. Ngā pā wata, the fortified pā, e tūtei ana. Tūtei is a word that's used, it tends to be manu tūtei that you will hear. If you have ever seen a flock of birds on the beach, and they may be catching crabs or eating something on the beach, there tends to be a couple of manu that sort of sit on the outside. And those manu are like sentinels. They'll warn the flock if anyone's coming that may be a threat. So that's what's called a tūtei. What we're saying here is that these pā once stood as sentinels that protected our people, just like those manu tūtei done or would do to protect the broader flock. So old pā, fortified pā wata, that stand as sentinels along the banks of the river. I taata o te awa. Ko pungare u te ai. So ahi, of course, we know that ahi is fire. Pungarehu, you may know what pungarehu is, but it's ashes. So the fire has turned to ashes is what that's saying. Ko pungarehu te ahi. So it's indicating that, and of course, as we know, once you put your fire out in one place, you're then moving. So it's indicating that there is no longer occupation upon these sites. So ko pungarehu te ahi is just the way of saying that. So these particular sites, while they still remain, while they are still sentinels, they are no longer occupied. And the particular pā that we're talking about is puke tapu and puke miro. That's right at the river mouth. Or pāringa. If you've ever been to Ōnairo Beach or Ōnairo campgrounds, you'll know where the batches are. Or pāringa sits right above those batches on the cliff up top there. I'll show you some images of that as well. Te ngaio, here we're just seeing the last part of the ngaio, but I'll show you a much better image of that. Moerangi, here we see moerangi, and kai tangata. Here we see kai tangata through here. Engari, e ora tonu ana a tupa whenua a kai tangata ki runga I te mato o te whenua. So it's saying, even though these pā are no longer occupied, the people of tupa whenua and the people of kai tangata are still alive and are still well and are still on our lands. I'll take you through a few images in relation to the kōrero. So just giving you guys a sneak preview. This is one of the images that we're using for the storyboards that we're going to be putting down at Wānanga Beach. This particular storyboard will be in the cul-de-sac area on this side of the river. So those who have been down there, you know that there's a bridge over here that you drive across, and then you can come all the way up here. Then you can walk down onto the beach. So up over here, we're going to have a storyboard, and this is going to be the image for the storyboard. And the purpose of this image is really to demonstrate how many pā there were up along our river. So we can see two pā sites right here. At tapu and Pokemido, we can see pā site over here, or Pāringa. You can see one over here, and one in the far distance. So again, it's just to demonstrate the number of pā that existed up along our awa or Nairo, and the types of activities that our tupuna would have been doing back in that time. So Puke Tapu and Puke Miro, this is where it's located. So if you come into the campground, that's the entrance here. And then come around, you'll see Puke Tapu and Puke Miro right here. There's a big pā site right in here. It's a triangular one right there. And then there's it's sort of come through here. There would have been lines of defence in case there were incursions from the coast. And then there's a real thin track that then leads to another pā site that was over here. So again, important pā site for us. We're going to have a sign that's going to be located just over here, a storyboard that will give some kōrero around Puke Tapu and Puke Miro. And this is the image that will show. So here we can see Puke Tapu and Puke Miro up on top of the cliff face, and what it could have looked like during that time. And again, we see the types of activities that our tupuna would have done at that time. This is the beachfront, the importance of the lake, sorry, not the lake, of the river, as a food source, as an avenue for transportation, for movement up and down the river, but a very vital aspect of survival, of well-being for us as a people. Our rivers were. So just another good view of our two pā sites here, Puke Tapu and Puke Miro. Another one that we talked about is Ōpāringa. So Ōpāringa is all up around here. So we can see the batches, and straight above the batches is where this pā site was. Sort of comes down here a bit, because in here in the bush area, there are still remnants of the pā site. And while we can't see it on here, there are some remnants of a small pā site up around here. But they would have had to have been joined together to form a much bigger papakainga, a much bigger area of occupation. And we seem to think that there was occupation all the way through here, because there's an old urupā up around here called Te Ngaio. This now is dockland, of course, but these are still remnants of our tupuna on the whenua. So Ōpāringa is another important pā site just in this little area. And this is how we see Ōpāringa. So again, we worked with an artist for these. This will be another storyboard, but we worked with an artist from Weta Workshop. He's a senior art director there who brought him down, showed him the area, gave him the kōrero around these particular sites, And this is the artistic imagery that he came up with from being there and from hearing the kōrero, but we think that it's pretty well designed. So it shows a little bit of an occupation here, a much bigger pathway over here, and it sort of connects together and extends further on. So a big pathway or paringa. And we think that this was well used as mara, while there isn't any evidence of mara, just the location itself would have been ideal for mara. This is Te Ngaio. The main road is just up over here, sort of comes around here. Oh, sorry, around here. And this here is Te Ngaio. So this is Old River Road, if you know Old River Road. Let me just go back to, come back to this one. So Old River Road is just over here. You turn right just as you go over the bridge. You turn right, then you drop down into Old River Road. If you go to Old River Road and then you come around, you'll then start to see the remnants of this pathway, Te Ngaio. Again, he pā maioro, so we can see the stepped nature of the pā. He pā tu waka waka. So what it had to have been a fortified pā because of its stepped nature. And there were 3 levels, so we can only see 2 in the image. So we can see one clearly here, one here, and there's a smaller one over here. But again, another fantastic example of a pā site in Ngāti Mutunga. So that's Te Ngaio pā. We then have Moerangi, so we can see where Moerangi was. There's still some remnants there. This is Mataro Road. So Old River Road comes out over here. Then you turn right onto Mataro Road. And then you see Moerangi. Then if you continue to follow it around, you then see this big pā site. So there's the road here. So then you see this big pathway called Kaitangata. Again, a fantastic example of a pā site. You can almost see the rua, little pockmarks here. So the holes for kumara. I've never been up on top of the pā site, but it'll be a really great opportunity if ever we got the chance to just to have a look, to stand on the pā and just to have a look at the remnants and what remains. What we are doing though is that we're working with one of our whānau in Taranaki iwi, Taipuni. He's quite familiar with GIS, so it's a mapping software, and he's been able to get access to some LiDAR images. And the great thing about LiDAR images is that it provides heat maps. It allows you to strip away any vegetation that may be on the pā site. Then you can actually see the contour of the land. We hope to share that in the new year once we develop that more. But the intention of that, again, is that it becomes a resource for our whānau. We'll be able to provide it on our website in our Māori Me area as a private portal for our registered members. But Kaitangata is the name of a pā site, but it is also the name of one of the hapu. When you listen to kōrero down at the top of the South Island about the heke and the migrations, it tends to be this hapu name that we're hearing. So you hear Kaitangata. And that's how you tend to hear Ngāti Mutunga being referenced down there as Kaitangata. Okay, so I'll just take us back to our kōrero. Okay, so we traverse north, haere ki Marakiraki, to the river mouth of Omairo. There were a number of old pā. The fortified pā that stand as sentinels along the banks of the river. For Pungarehu Te Ahi, the fires have been extinguished along these pā or on these pā. However, the people still remain on the face of the earth, and the people of Ngāti Mutunga and of Kaitangata still remain on the face of the earth. And that's us. So I'll take us to November, so Uringa Harangi. And those who are familiar with this image will know that this is Urenui River, or Te Wai o Kuranui. So of course we talked about Kuranui as being the tupuna of Ngāti Kura. So I'll go through the taki kōrero and then take us through the meaning. Ka aere ki māraki raki ki te pūwa o te wai o Kuranui. Arā ko te awa o Urenui. Ko te kura I tipua, ko te kura I tawito, ko te kura I huna, ko te kura nui te wai herenga taniwa. Ko maruei, ko te pianga, ko kumara kaiamo, ko po o kura, ko Urenui, ko te Urenui, ngā nonenga o ngā mātua tupuna kai te taata o te awa. Ko ia ko Ngāti Inetu I rā o ko Ngāti Aurutu. So again, we traverse north, kaere ki māraki raki, to the river mouth of Te Wai o Kuranui or Urenui River. Te kura I tipua, so this is just a bit of a play on words in terms of Kuranui, but it has quite a special meaning. Te kura I tipua, te kura I tawito, te kura I huna. Te kura I huna or te kura I huna, you may hear it like that, we hear it in relation to the kura haupua waka, and it was about the hidden knowledge. So te kura I huna, so huna to mean hide, kura in this context, so the traditional word for knowledge was kura. Now we tend to hear it as mātauranga, and it's more of a recent term, mātauranga. Recent meaning like in the last 150 years, but prior to that, the word was kura. So I'm sort of using this as a way to bring us back into Kuranui, and that Kuranui being an important person. So ko te kura e tipua, so the knowledge or the knowledge of the exemplar, of the example, te kura e tipua. Te kura e tawito, the knowledge of the ancient ones, or the ancient knowledge, the traditional knowledge. Te kura e huna, the hidden knowledge. And then, of course, bringing us into ko Kuranui te wai herenga taniwa, and then tying that in to our pepehatanga kōrero that we looked at earlier. So, ko Kuranui te wai herenga taniwa, Kuranui is then the strategic stronghold to resist incursions. And what that's referring to, as I mentioned earlier, was that there's a number of parasites up along Urenui River. And if a war party ever found themselves in this particular area, they would become overwhelmed with the number of people that would then come in. So the parasites that were along the bank, so ko te taata o te awa, ko maruehi. So we can't see maruehi, but I'll show you on another image. But maruehi is just off to the right of this image. Those who have been down here will be familiar with the golf course. Over here is the golf club, and up behind the golf club, from the golf club all the way to the ocean, is Maruehi, a well-known settlement area for us. Maruehi, of course, being an important place for Mutunga. That's where Mutunga was born. So his father being Kahukura and his mother being Hinemoe. Their kāinga was at Maruehi, and that's where Mutunga was born. We have Te Pihanga up here. So Te Pihanga is the pā of Uenuku. So we saw on the Hapu map, in the Onairo area, we had Ngāti Kura, so for Kuranui, and we also had Ngāti Uenuku. And Uenuku, the tupuna, this is one of his pā sites, Te Pihanga. I don't know if there's a connection to the maunga in Te Waretoa, but I've just heard this one has been Te Pihanga. I haven't heard of any connection. Kumara Kaiamo, so of course a big part of the township sits on this, the Urenui township, I mean. sits on this pā site, Kumara Kaiamo. We have Pōokura up over here, this big pā site here. Te Urenui, so this is Te Urenui, all this big forested area. That's Te Urenui. And then, of course, Nuninga. We've talked about Nuninga o ngā mātua tupuna. And koia ko Ngāti Inetu I koia ko Ngāti Aurutu. These are the two apu of the Urenui area. Okay, so we can see Maruehi. This is the golf club. So if the pā, I think that's the pā. So Urenui pā. Then you come down Beach Road and then you follow this around. You'll go past the Urenui pā, which is here. You'll then go past the golf club. And from there all the way to the coastline is Maruehi. We can see quite a bit of erosion, of course, that's occurring along our coastline and in particular in this area. But a very significant place for us, Maruehi. One, as I mentioned, because that's the birthplace of Mutunga. But it was also the place that our Ware Kauri whānau returned to in 1868 on taki or Ware Kauri. So on the return voyage when some of the whānau returned back to Ngāti Mutunga. We've got storyboards down at Urenui. We've got 3 storyboards there, and there is one that talks about Maruehi and has some kōrero about what I've just explained, those 2 particular events. And this is the image that we've used on the storyboard. So here we can see Maruehi up through here. The coastline and how effective the coastline would have been for gathering kai. And of course, key resources such as harakeke. Then we see Kaukura and Mutunga. So just an illustration of our tupuna. So again, if ever you get down to Urenui camp, have a look at this particular sign because there's some fantastic kōrero on there and you'll see this particular image. We have Pianga up here, so the pā of Uenuku. Kumara Kaiamo. Nowadays, we just see this part of the pā, and that's the only remnants of the pā site, but we understand that the pā was quite extensive and moved all the way up into the town, up into the village over here. But again, sat on a real location. And you would have expected proper kāinga down here, Mara. So it would have been well occupied at this side of the river and the side of the river. We have Pōokura, another big pā site. Again, as I was mentioning in terms of the mapping software that we're using and the LiDAR images that provide the heat maps that show us the topography, it allows us to strip away this vegetation. So what we want to be able to do is show out whānau what the contour of the land looks like now. And then from there we can make some kind of assessment as to what it is that we're seeing, which we can't of course see at the moment because of the trees that are there. Pōokura is another important tupuna. When we think of the waka that landed on our coastline, there was more than the waka rongonui that we know. So while we tend to say tokomaru, there's a number of waka that landed along our coastline. One that we talk about in terms of Ngāti Mutunga is Te Waka Manaia, which is Tahatuna. Manaia is the father of Urenui. So of course that's where the river was named, and then the big pā site Te Urenui just over here to the left in the image. But prior to that, there were 3 waka, well-known waka that arrived on our coastline. So the first one was Kahutara, and the captain of Kahutara was Maruiwi. Next one was Taikorea, and the captain of tai kōrero was Ruatamore, and then the third waka was Okoki, and the captain of Okoki was Taitawaro, and the younger brother of Taitawaro was Pohokura. So, of course, we still see Okoki on our landscape, which is Okoki Pā, where the monument for Te Rangihiro is, or Sir Peter Buck. And we also see Pohokura. So, again, remnants of these old historical waka that we don't hear a lot about anymore, but they were waka that arrived before Tokomaru. And this here is one of the other images that we've got on our signs. This sign here is just down by the boat ramp. If anyone's been to Urenui Campground, know where the boat ramp is. It's not far from the boat ramp. And this particular image shows a number of things. So first it shows our Kipuna Uenuku right here at his pā site, Pihanga. Second, it shows Kumara Kaomo all the way up here, but the fact that it would have been densely populated on this side as well. Here we see Pohokura, and up the back here we see Te Urenui. So this is what it would have potentially looked like back in the day of our ancestors, and which again is why we call it Te Wakararunga Taniwa, the strategic stronghold to resist incursions of war parties, because if you ever tried to venture, a war party ever tried to venture through this river, it would have to go through all of these pā in order to do that. So a nice image again. We use the same artist to be able to create these images. And this here is the Urenui. It's a big pā site, this one. And again, the LiDAR project that we're doing at the moment will really give whānau a good opportunity to see what the contour of the land looks like once you can strip away all of the vegetation. So, as I mentioned, Urenui is the son of Manaia. Manaia is a well-known tupuna. His waka was Ta'atuna. We also understand that he also came on Tokomaru waka. But he named the river and named the pā site after his son, Urenui. When you do have conversations with some of the community, they like to think they understand what Urenui means, and they just take it literally. So from the literal translation of the word, and what they miss really is the fact that he was a tupuna, and our tupuna, an important person for us. Which is one of the reasons why we wanted to have these storyboards up, so that we can start telling our narrative around Te Urenui and who Urenui was. So in terms of Urenui, you may hear him under a couple of titles. So I've heard him as Tu Urenui, Mai Urenui, Tu Mai Urenui, but these are all names that reference the same tupuna. In our kōrero, and I've confirmed this with some of our tūhoi whānau, in our kōrero we say that Urenui married Wairaka, and Wairaka was the daughter of Poroa, Poroa being the captain of Mā Tātua waka. Wairaka, of course, is attributed to the naming of the township there, Whakatane or Whakatane, and the act that she done and the words that she said, Pa Whakatane au ia au. So I will turn myself into a man, and she done that so that she could swim out to then rescue the Mā Tātua waka and then bring it back in. But that Wairaka is the same Wairaka who married Urenui. Bit of deception, of course, that occurred there. Our tupuna was a bit of an opportunist, Urenui, but also someone who had resolve and determination in his goals, and once he set his mind to it, he ensured that he moved forward to achieve his goal. And his goal was to be able to marry Wairaka. So from that union, You have the son that came from that, which is Tamatea ki te huatai, and the youngest son of Tamatea ki te huatai was Tūhoi Pōtiki, and that's where the Tūhoi people, or that's their eponymous ancestor. So that's a real big connection between Ngāti Mutunga and Tūhoi, and Ngāti Mutunga and Mātātua. And this here is an image of the Urenui. So if you again come into the Urenui campground, you'll pass the golf course, you'll come around, you'll pass the boat wash, where they wash the boats and then fillet the fish. Just by the boat wash there, we've put this sign, because it looks directly at the pā site. A really good example of what the pā site could have looked like, but quite an extensive pā, one of the big pā along the river. Okay, so I'll just take us back to kōrero. We traverse northwards to the river mouth of Waiokura or Urenui River. And then we use kuranui to play on the word kura being knowledge. So the knowledge of the learned, of the exemplar, of the role model, the knowledge of the ancients, the knowledge that is hidden. Kura nui te waiherenga taniwa, so the river that resists incursions. Ko maruehi, so we then talk about our pā. Maruehi to the right, pihanga, ko marakaiamo, pohokura, te urenui, ngā nuninga, the places of occupation of our ancestors along the banks of the river. And this is where Ngāti Unetui and Ngāti Auratu resided. Let's go through our images again and bring us to our last taki kōrero, which is for December. So here we can again see 3 pā sites. So this here is the extent of Arapawa Nui. It's huge. Fantastic example of a historical pā site of a pātu wata. Again, in our rohe, in our small area along our coastline. This was a pā site of 2 of the grandsons of Mutunga, 2 brothers named Rehetai and Tukutahi, who also traversed this coastline, stayed at Onairos for times, at times, and also pushed into the Ngāti Rahiri Te Awa area. There's records and accounts of them taking pā sites in Ngāti Rahiri. We can see another pā site up here, Waka'u, and we can just see remnants of a pā site here. This is one of 2 that you can see along the river. Again, we were mostly coastal people, river people, occupied the rivers, occupied the coastline. And of course, this is Mimi Tangiatua. Those who grew up here would see the difference of the river mouth when they were growing up. So of course it continues to change because of the sand. Used to be able to get pippies out here. I don't think you can anymore. At the moment we have a rāhui on this because of the pollution that's happening upriver, and we've actually been in an environmental court this whole week, declining the consent of the operators who want to continue operating up the river. We just don't think they're doing a good enough job and definitely aren't looking after our awa. Kapai, so I'll do our kōrero and then again take us through an explanation of it. Ka ako o tita aere ki māraki raki ki te pūwa o te wai o miira. Arā, ko mi tangi atua. Ki reiranga pātū wata ngā takuwai, ngā nuninga kumo ngā mātua tūpuna. ko Akāu, ko Arapawa Nui, ko Wairoa, ko Ōmi'i, no roto i a te kēkerewai. Ko uki atu rā ki ta manga o Papatiki, ki ta pā o Tītoki no roto i a Ngāti o Kiokinga. Ko ia ko Ngāti Mutunga ko te roinga kōrero, ko te iwi wakararunga taniwa kāputa ka aorai. So we then finish our journey northwards to the river mouth of Mihiro, or Te Waio Mihiro, or Mimitangi Atua. There are the fortified pā, ngā takuwahi. So takuwahi is like ahi kā, places of occupation. Same as noni ngā kumu, place of occupation, permanent occupation of our ancestors. We have Wakāu over here, Arapawa Nui, Wairoa, this is a Papakainga, Ōmi'i, no roto i a te kēkerewai, from the hapu te kēkerewai. We then return where we started, which is the Papatiki stream, and Tītoki Pā, which is in the area of Ngāti Mutunga. This is Ngāti Mutunga. This is the rohe ngā kōrero. This is an explanation of our boundaries, of our area. Te iwi wakararunga taniwa, the iwi that resisted incursions, and we continue to survive and we continue to thrive as a people. Ka puta ka ora e. So in terms of Wakāu, so we can see Wakāu here. This is just a Google Maps spot. So if you just looked on Google Maps, you'll be able to see exactly what we're seeing here. But you can see remnants of the pā. Of course, we've got a lot of erosion that's happening along our coastline. So this would have been a much bigger pā site. But a big portion of it has been lost to erosion. So this is Wakāu. And right next to Wakāu, so Wakāu is just over here. We then have this big pā site. Huge. Arapawa Nui. Pā site of Re'etai and Tukutai. Those who are familiar with the battle that occurred at Okoki Pā, the battle called Motunui, when Ngāti Toa come and stayed with Ngāti Mutunga for a period of time. And then we started the migrations down south with the Heke Pāparamoa. This here is where Tainui stayed for a period of time just prior to the Battle of Motunui. So that's Arapawa Nui. It's some have asked, is there a reference to Arapawa down in the South Island? My understanding is no, and it's really just based on the spelling. Rather than a W, it has an O down south. I could be wrong, but I just haven't seen any reference to Arapawa Nui and Arapawa having a connection. Wairoa, so this place here we understand was a big papakainga known as Wairoa, Wairoa. And then up here you then start to get a real steep ridge line. And we understand that area is called Arapawa. So we have Arapawa Nui, which is here. And on the other side of the river, the ridge line following the coast, there was another pā site there called Arapawa. So Wairoa, not Waiora, and Ōmi'i. So we understand, so we can see clearly two areas that would have been pā sites. My understanding is that they formed a bigger pā called Ōmi'i, as opposed to being singular pā. So again, very close to Arapawa Nui, very close to Wakāu, and just on the other side of Wairoa, which is just over here. Then we travel further north, coming back to our northern boundary. So here in our settlement, it talks about Tiki Ridge. This is where I understand that Tiki Ridge is. Here there's some people call it a castle, but that's where one of our pā sites were, and that pā site was called Wakarewa or Whakarewa. Here is the Waiti campground, and you can come out here and either walk or even drive. People do drive along here. And then you can see the start of Papatiki Stream right there. So Papatiki Stream is one of our key boundary markers as well, which then flows through, comes around, then splits off. Then splits off on either side of Titiki Pā. And that's Titiki Pā. So when we say mai titiki ki te rawa te uia, this is the titiki that we're referring to. Okay, so let's go back to the kōrero. Okay, we then finish our kawakoti te aere, we then finish our journey going north through the river mouth of Meiro, of Mimitangi Atua. There are the pā, so the fortified pā, the places of occupation, of permanent occupation of our ancestors, which is Waka'u here, Arapawa Nui, Omei, Wairoa. Norotia Te Kerewai, within the area of the hapu Te Kerewai. Ka oki atu rā ki te mango Papatiki, we then travel north to Papatiki Stream, to Tiki Pā, which is in the area of Ngāti Okinga. That's Ngāti Mutunga. This is our kōrero of our area. The people who resisted incursions continue to thrive, continue to survive. Ka puta ka ora. And that just shows the slides that we've gone through. So throughout the three Wānanga, we've managed to traverse, if I just go back to that, managed to traverse all of our rohe. So the first Wānanga, we talked about coming through here. Second Wānanga, we went all the way around here. And then the third Wānanga, we've covered the coastline, all the way back to our northern point at Titiki. So as I mentioned, the intent of the calendar was to really provide some kōrero for our whānau, should you ever want to use it. It'd be quite a challenge to be able to do all of the 12 taki at once. But that was really the intention, was to be able to provide that resource for people to be able, for our whānau to be able to do that. There's opportunity to be able to take small snippets out. There's some kupu that you could utilise to help build your own vocabulary. There's a lot of kōrero around our pā, our places of significance as well. We've tried to, as I mentioned, utilise other kupu for the same thing. So an example is here we're saying muriwai, whereas in other places we're saying awa. So just another word for awa that we tend to hear in Taranaki. And have used a couple of different kupu for boundaries. So before we saw tungi as a word for boundary, tā uhi uhi is a word for boundary, pāhuki as well is another one that we've included, pāhuki. So again, being able to provide you kupu to help you broaden your own vocabulary and to also see what other types of words are used here in Taranaki specifically. Places, key forest areas such as Rerekino, Pouiatua, Taramoko, big forest lots within our rohe. The connections with our iwi, so our northern iwi being Ngāti Tama. So we can see Ngāti Tama being referenced through here. And as we go around more inland and then follow in Waitara River, we start to see our connection with Ngāti Maru Waranui. Then we come around, follow Waitara River down, and then we start see our connections with Taki Awa that come through the kōrero. And then return back to our start place, which is Papatiki and Titiki. So I thought I'd do the taki kōrero, just so that we've got it recorded. And just to be able to, so that you can hear the kupu, hear the pronunciation, hear the flow. So taki kōrero indicates, so taki is like a beat. Taki is to also recite. So there's a bit of a flow that you try and keep when you're doing this type of kōrero. So of course, the imagery that we've got in our mind is that we're starting at Titoki, making our way inland, coming around back to the coast, making our way north back to Titoki. Apai. Mata ki te pari moana o te ta'a wakararo ki te pai o Titoki e wakamarumaru ana e te pātū wata nui ko wakarewa. Tau waru tia te muri wai o Papatiki ki te nonenga o Titoki pā. I take ake tōna ingoa i te muri wai a rere pātatana. Ko ia ko te pāuki o te tai wakararo o Ngāti Mutunga. O rapakau atu ki uta ki te muri wai o manga ia. Ko ia ko te takiwā o Ngāti o Kiokinga. Mai te mango manga ia ka whakaripi te pāuki o te tai wakararo ki uanui ko te wakapiritanga tērā o Ngāti Mutunga rā o ko Ngāti Tama. Te wai taka wiriwiri o te pāuki wakararo, te wai o ke tuna, te wai oanga e tangata, te wai ononga wakapapa, ko waitere iti te tūtakitanga o Tarawa, o ngā iwi e toru, ko Ngāti Mutunga, ko Ngāti Tama, ko Ngāti Maru Waranui. Ku toro atu rā ki mā tonga o te mātāpuna o Waitara awa, ko Waitara iti. Ki ngā wai rere o rere kapa, rere pau, rere ki uta, rere ki tai, rere kau te wai o Waitara mai te kōrero. Wā ia te au o te muri wai o Waitara uri rauna i te motu o muki, te ara i wakae rungia e te wai ki te whenua. Kaurea tonu tia te wai o Waitara awa ki te taata o te urua rere kino, tai atu ki te ngā ere o paui atua. Ka rere manu ki runga, ka o makiwi ki raro, ka tere ki te kōanga kia kimi ia te oranga. Pauai o rā te kere wai a Ngāti Aurutu ki te whenua. Ka pipi ake te wai, ka puake ki te ngā ere o paui atua, tū tau ti atu e te pau tauito, tū tata mai e te pau tauira, te pau e tū toa ana mo te tai ao, ko ia ko te tungi rā uti o ngā iwi e rua, ko Ngāti Mutunga, rāua ko Ngāti Maru Waranui. Peka atu rā ki te manga o Tara Maukau, o ia ngā taata o te manga, e karapotia nei te ngā ere o Tara Maukau. E rea te tara ki te tau poto, e rea te tara ki te tau roa, ki mi ia te kai o mua. No roto a Tara Maukau i a Ngāti Uanuku rā o ko Ngāti Kura, ki reira ko ngā mātāpuna o tātou muriwai ko Urenui ko Nairo. Rere kau atu rā ki te tāu i o waka te tonga, kei wānga nui o Ngāti Mutunga rā o ko te ati awa, ko te tā o ta o Waitara awa. Wai te au o te uru, te au wakamarumaru i te marangai, u mau i te au pāuki o te manga o Tara Maukau me te awa o Waitara. Aere ki tae ki te tūtakitanga o te awa o Waitara me te manga o Mākara, kātai ka anga atu rā ki te kūreitanga o ngā mātua tūpuna. Wai te au o ngā manga ko poke weka, ko pau tōtara, ko poke mai, ka urianga kōpu o te manga o manga ewa, ruku ianga kōpiku o te manga o waiau, ui ake rā, te pūwa o waiau ki te arata poko a tāwaki ki te kūreitanga o Ngātini waka. Wai te takotaimo ana o te kūreitanga o te tai o wāuru ki te nonenga kumu ngā mātua tūpuna, arā ko te rau o te uia. Ko ia ko te pā mai oro, te pā tū wata, te papakaanga e tā ui mā tonga nei o Ngāti Mutunga. Te tongi ki tai kei wānga nui a Ngāti Mutunga i a te ati awa e waka mō i o te awa nuiti ana. Ka aere ki mā raki raki ki te pū wa o te awa o Nairo, ki reira te mao ngā pā tau i tō, ngā pā tū wata wata e tū te ana ki ta o te awa. Ko punga o te aonga, te ai o ngā pā, ko puke tapu, ko puke miro, ko pāringa, ko te ngaio, ko moerangi, ko kai tangata. Engari, e ora tonu wana tūpa wenoa kai tangata ki runga i te unua. Ka aere ki mā raki ki te pū wa o te wai o Kuranui, ara ko te awa urenui. Ko te kura e tipua, ko te kura e tauito, ko te kura e una, ko Kuranui te wai ere ngataniwa, ko maruei, ko te pīanga, ko kumara kai amo, ko pookura, ko te urenui, ngā nuninga o ngā mātua tūpuna, kei te taata o te awa, ko ia, ko Ngāti Netui, rāua ko Ngāti Urutu. Ka wakoti te aere ki mā raki ki te pū wa o te wai o Miirau, ara ko mimitangi atua, ki reira ngā pātū wata ngā takuwai, ngā nuninga kumu o ngā mātua tūpuna, ko Akāu, ko Arapawa Nui, ko Wairoa, ko Ōmii, no roto i a te kere wai. Ko oki atu rā ki ta mango papatiki ki ta pā o tītoki, no roto i a Ngāti Oki ngā, ko ia ko Ngāti Mutunga, ko te roinga kōrero, ko te iwi wakararunga taniwa, kāputa, kāorai. Tūturo waka maua kia tīna uie, tai ki e. Apai, so that brings us to the end of our wānanga o te pōnei. Hopefully you've found it interesting, found it useful. We've recorded each of these series and we've put them onto our YouTube channel. We'll also ensure that they're put into the Māori Me private portal for our registered members. Just a fantastic slide to finish off there that just shows all of the different pictures of places of significance for our people within our rohe that connects us to place and connects us to people as well. So with that, e te wānau tēnei ka mi atu rā. Ka mi atu rā ki a koutou e ngā haringa are mai, ki tēnei kōrero, ki tēnei wānanga, ara ko uru mai rā ki roto i te ware kōrero o Ngāti Mutunga i te pōnei. Nō reira, tēnei anō rā ka mi atu ki a koutou kua toro mai, kia rongo anō rā ki tēnei kōrero. Kia mō i o tia ānui tia, i a tātou nei rohe, o tātou nei ononga, i te wenua, me ngā noninga kumu, te pungere ua i o ngā mātua tūpuna. Nō reira, ko ia rā o rātou, ko we e atu rā ki te pō. Ka tangi ia, ka tangi ia, ka tangi tonu ia ki a rātou. Ara, rātou ki rātou, o ki rawa mai ki a tātou e te ongo ora, nō reira, tēnei kāmii, tēnei kāmii, tēnei kāmii atu rā. Mi anō rā ki tēnei wāanga o te tau, o te puatanga mai o te puutukawa, ara ko te wā o te kiri I mete, tēnei anō rā, te wā ari, te wā koa, te wā mata kuikui, te wā piri ki te wānau, piri ki te ngā tamariki, piri anō rā ki ngā mokopuna. Nō reira tēnei mātou o te tari o te runanga o Ngāti Mutunga, ka me I atu rā ki a koutou katoa e te wānau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, ara, tēnā koutou katoa. Hopefully you found that interesting tonight, whānau. Really appreciate you joining in. Went a bit over an hour actually, so closer to an hour and a half, but it was good to be able to have the kōrero and really appreciate everyone tuning in and everyone having listening to the kōrero. Okay, so if I just have a look at some of the questions. To estimate how many people. That's a good question, Henry. I'm not too sure how many people would have resided in the park. It's a bit difficult to know what the population of our people would have been. But what we do know, and because it still remains on our whenua, is the number of pā that there were. We don't know if they were all built around the same time, so being able to time them is a bit difficult. But when we see that the map that I showed earlier today, we can see that there was a significant amount of pā along our coastline. In terms of the YouTube channel, the easiest way to find that is on our website. So there's a media page on our website, and then that's got the link to our YouTube channel. Then you can subscribe to that. So it's got all of the Wānanga from last year around the karakia that we done. It's got the Wānanga for this year and some of the online Wānanga as well that we've had for some of our other kaupapa. Right. If there's no other questions, as I mentioned, just really appreciate the time, and thank you all for joining in and being a part of our kōrero tonight. So with that, I'll finish us off with the karakia, just to wrap up our wānanga o te pō. This particular karakia is all about energies. So when we talk about tai, so when we think of tai, we think of the movement of the ocean, so the movement of the tide. Here in Taranaki, we have a particular ōrakahangatanga kōrero, so a particular origin kōrero that talks about energies, and that's called te waha ātai. So this particular karakia talks about the different energies and the dynamic energies in different parts of the day. So the energies from the night, the energies from the day, and how we can utilize those energies to help help build and help grow and help develop our desires, to be able to achieve the aspirations that we have before us, to be able to provide us the motivation, to be able to provide us the drive to help achieve those aspirations. Nō reira, te mihi anō rā kia koutou e tako ana, ka kapi ake rā i tā tātou kōrero i te pō, ki tēnei karakia. Nō reira, kei tā waka wini ngatai o te pō, kei tā waka wana ngatai o te mārama, kei tā waka rūrutu ngatai o pūpuke te iri, pūpuke te māara, pūpuke te wānanga nui o te kore. Matua te pūpuke, matua te iri, matua anuku, matua arangi, matua ki te waka tupua, matua ki te waka tauito, tupua anuku, tupua arangi, e rungo e ukiri ake ki runga, tūturu o uti waka maua kia tīna, ui e, tai ki e. Ka pai. Tēnā koutou.